Welcome, listeners, to this, our 15th episode of the Heresy Accountability Buddies podcast. I'm Jacob, and I'm joined by...
Dan.
Duncan.
Jack.
John.
And Jamie.
And it seems we may have had an 11th hour edition here. Welcome.
Hello.
Joe!
He certainly is, and we're glad to have him with us. Joe, welcome. We're glad to have you all here with us. We've got a great show for you this evening. We're going to be talking about Music City Heresy. We've got our Thousand Sons content lined up for the show, as well as a quick announcement regarding the Michigan GT. Previously stated, we believed there were about 5 trader slots open for that event. It is our understanding at this time that that event has now reached its initial capacity. They are currently trying to acquire more spots and more table space for that event, but the only way that they're going to be able to get that is that if people get on the wait list. So make sure you follow up with the Michigan GT and declare your preference, loyalist or trader, and that way we can both get that event expanded as well as see you there. But first, as our usual, let's go over everybody's hobby progress. What have we been up to?
Yeah, so John, I went through, I've gotten 99% of the jet bike bases done, so I've been posting a little bit about all of the tiny base accoutrements I've been working on with tiny beer bottles with tiny labels and word bearer parts, chemical parts, wood that I've kind of aged up. I've gotten almost every base built. And the problem I've run into now is the fact that the nice new bases really don't match the bases that the characters that I'd built before. So now I'm having to go back and build some new bases to rebase those old characters. As we talk tonight, I've got to finish those up. And the other thing I did was I found the local dollar store has sets of erasers that are shaped like couches, and that is the silliest thing I've ever seen in my life, but I bought one on a whim because it's $1, and I noticed when I got home that they are perfectly 40k size. So as someone who's got a bunch of Necromunda terrain to build in the future and a bunch of City Fight terrain to build in the future, after you prime the goofy looking eraser, you come out with a nice little brown couch sectional, and for $1 that's cheaper than buying the resin to make it, or cheaper than buying resin to cast up another couch that someone else has sculpted. So for $10 I got enough couches to do an entire half block.
Now I just need you to go and convert Gulliman to be sitting in a recliner with his feet up. I mean, what else was he doing through most of the heresy?
That sounds like some artwork we have somewhere. Or
there's a love seat. There's a table. There's a couple of pillows. I think I've got a pretty good set of terrain here for $1. So just give it a spray and give it a wash and some dry brushing. A couple of them, make them look nicer. I was saying earlier they could be. I wanted to build a rogue trader kind of hive interior section for like a starship. You definitely know that once they get done with their ladies of the evening and murdering them, that they want to get a new couch, the old couch out the window. So yeah, I think these are pretty good.
You could set a couple of them on fire and make it look like a University of Tennessee football.
Or a UK basketball game.
Yep.
Or football.
We just like to burn couches. That's all we do.
Yep.
Yeah.
Burn couches.
I'll go next because mine is really easy. I drove a lot this weekend. That's been my hobby project. Duncan, you're up.
You didn't let me get to my games.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Y'all had all the super games. I had a couple of minor 1,500 point games with the jet bikes. I will say they're not as bad as I had feared, but they definitely do have some lacking. Being T4 with 2 wounds, I tried throwing apothecaries and squads. It definitely helped a little bit on the survivability, but I definitely think that this list isn't the be-all, end-all that it used to be. I mean, obviously, it's not Dark Angels with acid reflux shells, and it's not...
That's what I had, acid reflux.
It's not the old Alpha Legion list with prefer to me everything, but I think it's going to be a fun list, and I think as I expand it with troops, land speeders, that'll be a good list. So that is officially everything I've gone through.
All right,
sorry,
Duncan, I choose you.
Let's see here. The last week I assembled, primed, and finished a squad of 10 tactical sport marines with Volkite calivers. I finished 4 Vexilla for the Sons of Horus list, 5 Vexillas for the Sons of Horus list. Got that all done, and bagged everything up and took it down to Music City Heresy. And I rode in the truck with Jack and had lots of fun down there. And we'll talk about that when we get to that part. Dan, what'd you do?
So when we were on the podcast, I painted one fang on my Kratos, and so the theme there is my Blood Angels are going to be space vampires. All the beakies will have fangs painted on the beakies, and so all my tanks are going to have fangs on them too. So I freehanded a big fang. I'm really proud of it. Now I need to make the other side match. My hobby during the week, this weekend was shot. I was camping with Boy Scouts and hiking and stuff. But I did finish building my Maul of Perdition Praetor jump pack model. So I used the Zephon model as a base, and I did a ton of work to him. So I started with a robot or mechanic. And so I took all the mechanical stuff off. So I cut his leg and put a Mark 6 leg on and put a Crom-like Blood Angels bit with a big drop on that leg. I put his jump pack on and decided that I wanted to use one of the winged jump packs from the Sanguinary Guard, the 40k Sanguinary Guard, which are going to be my bodyguard for him anyway. I'm gonna end up running a retinue, and then a buddy 3D printed some hammers with Blood Angel symbol up on the top of them with the resin printer, and ended up hacking that into 3 different bits and pulling an arm from an old Mark 7 Marine and left arm from I think from Cromlech. Piecing it all together, so I don't know, it's probably over 24 individual parts that make up my model, but it was a ton of work piecing it all together and getting the arms so it looked mostly good. I still got to tweak the shaft on the hammers a little bent, so I think I just hit it with hair dryer and get it up because it's resin, but a lot of work, but I'm really happy with it. I had pulling the jump pack off and even putting another jump pack on was a ton of work, so I don't know, he's probably 3.5 hours of build time just putting together. That's what I worked on.
He looks cool. That's definitely the way that you make all the cool characters. I know from experience, my Ultramarines that I spend that much time on or combine 13, 14 different kits. Always makes it really cool.
Yeah, thanks. I'm really happy with him. I don't know that the Maul is the best choice, but it looks cool, and he's going to roll with that for now.
What about you, Jamie? What have you done?
Or Jamie, somebody.
So this week I have just been building saber tanks because I've got a whole, I don't know what you call it, a brace. I've got a lot. I've got 9 saber tanks I've got to build, and I'm about halfway through it. And then it's been raining a ton here, and I've not been able to get anything primed this week, so I've just kind of been building what I can. That's pretty much it.
Nice. 9 saber tanks is a lot of saber tanks, brother.
Oh yeah, it is. I've got 6 of them with autocannons and 3 of them with Chumis. So
damn, I just magnetized mine. I didn't bother to go for I think I have 6, but still, they're fun little tanks.
Yeah. Well, what about you, Mr. Jacob? What have you been up to?
In the last week, I did finally get both halves of the base plate together for my Dreadnought drop pod, and I had the wonderful misfortune of completely obliterating my size 2 nozzle for my Pash Talon. Thankfully, the replacement came in this weekend, and I've got it back together and hopefully up and running. I haven't shot any paint through it yet, but who knows? Maybe there's a unforeseen upside here, and maybe it'll stop being quite so much as a pig as what it's been in the last couple weeks. Still hoping to get 2 Charybdis knocked out in short order, but it didn't come together this last week. I had a couple hours to make up at work that kind of compromised my hobby time, unfortunately. That's how it goes, unfortunately, some days.
So
work always getting in the...
Speaking of airbrushes, I wanted to purchase, people will argue whether purchases count as hobby progress. But ever since, I don't know, 3 years ago or something, I sprayed Chris Bergeron's Harder and Steinbeck Infinity airbrush, and I've wanted one for a really long time. And I've got my 2 Patriots, and they work really well, and they didn't have a pressing need for it, but I've just wanted one. Well, I posted it in the Facebook group chat, but a couple weeks ago, they announced that they have made a special edition that has some artwork from a girl from Kiev, and all the profits are going to help Ukraine and what's going on in Ukraine. So I decided it was time to finally bite the bullet and order myself a high quality airbrush that hopefully, if everything will say, will become my, not necessarily workhorse because I'll still cater it for big stuff, but for quality airbrushing, I'll have a quality airbrush that I'll be keeping and enjoy for a really long time. So the profits for it are going to a good cause. So I was really happy to do that and make sure I point shopping for such a thing. Instead, I'll probably do a quick unboxing on Facebook page as well when I can talk about how it works.
That's
Hey,
cool.
Dan. Sorry, go ahead.
Do you want to put the link up for it on the Facebook group page in case people want to do it?
I did already.
Okay.
I can bump it. I'll bump it when the podcast airs.
Okay.
If I remember, so that way people can.
See what you're talking about?
Yeah. So
Dan, do you know what size needle and nozzle are on that?
it came with a 0.2, and it came with a smaller cup. And I did some researching and ordering direct from them. I could get the bigger cup and the 0.4 nozzle and needle for cheaper than the couple places I saw the kits for to get them in the United States. So I ordered the whole shebang. So I think it was like $275 with shipping, which I think is a pretty good deal for that.
That is a good deal
with everything that comes
Thank
with
you,
it,
Joe.
and it being, having the cool artwork on it. They have a black and a pink one. I ordered the black one. Not because the pink. I thought about the pink a lot and thought it would be really cool. And then I thought about cleaning a pink airbrush and getting paint all over it.
Yeah.
And decided black was better. So that's mostly a functional decision. I think the pink would have been functionally, it would have been a poor choice. So
Kat from UK Studios has been wanting them to make a pink airbrush for almost 6 years now. So she finally got it done. She was been pushing it for a long time.
That's cool.
No, you'll like it, Dan. I'm sure they're super good, and every H&S that I've used or borrowed from anybody, they're really good.
Yeah, no, I'm geek for it. Like I said, I sprayed and Chris had his, and I don't think he had I'm pretty sure it was before they did the CK needle, and the needle was perfect for me, but I know I have really small hands and fingers. So a lot of people, I do use the extended trigger on
the Patriots.
But it was just so smooth and felt so good in my hand when his that I think I'll be really happy with it. I'm looking forward to it. And it's already shipped, so they said I should have it within 2 weeks of ordering. So possibly next weekend it might even. I was surprised. They use DHL though, so we've already talked about DHL uses magic teleportation technology or something to deliver. So
Yep.
That they do.
Yep. All right. What about you, Joe? What have you been up to, brother?
I hadn't been up to a whole lot, had a pretty quiet weekend. As far as personal hobby stuff, our local shop has been doing the Repentance campaign. That's, I think, Guerrilla War Game Miniatures or something on YouTube. They released a free campaign PDF thing to stores, and basically we started at 1,000 and we add 250. So I've been painting up stuff for that. Locally, we had a lot of Alpha Legion players who made the mistake of telling me that they get like 5 extra points for killing for shooting my HQ. And since I play Iron Hands, losing our heads is kind of a normal thing for us.
Yes,
So
it is.
yeah, I painted up a Land Raider for him to hide in, and a Contemptor with a big Choom gun for that. Other than that, I'm using my Adepticon stuff. We also we ran a little event out here in Nashville, Music City Heresy. Went off real well. I think we're talking about that later, though. But yeah, that's about it for me, hobby progress-wise.
Outstanding. I think that's covered everybody. So let's move on into Music City Heresy. It's held down in Nashville, Tennessee, home of music in the city, possibly.
Nashville hot chicken. Can't forget that.
Hot chicken.
Hot chicken. There we go. It was a 2-day event starting Friday, going Friday and Saturday. Friday was Centurion, a Zone Mortalis mega battle, and Centurion death match. So I did not play in any of that because I was tired from driving and I'm ornery. So Duncan, why don't you tell about your game? Because you got to play the honorable Joe.
Actually, before I do that, I will actually let Joe tell us about the history and all that of Music City or Music City Heresy, because I think that as one of the founders, he should actually do that kind of thing.
All right, thank you. So 2017, Dave Sampson and I really wanted to get people to play Heresy, and locally we didn't have anybody playing Heresy. So we got together, and we had a buddy who was running a small, basically he had a tournament for Kings of War, and he had some extra space, some extra tables, and we said, hey, can we run an event? And that was the first Music City Heresy, 2017. For the past few years, we've been running it at NashCon, which is mostly a historical wargaming miniature society convention. But they also let us come in and do some stuff like this. They've got other things, but our event has been going now for what is this, the 5th year? We took off for COVID, of course, like everyone else. But this year, Mike Wooten and Greg, they have been taken the reins of it. I'm pretty much the mascot at this point. But we've had an ongoing narrative this whole time. Every year, a little bit gets added based on what happened in the previous year. And with the change, essentially the change in the old guard with the new guard, the Circus Ingus system, the Ring of Fire, the narrative that I had come up with, we've basically ended that whole system. Like that whole system got blowed up real good. Everybody kept fighting over the big red button. Somebody fell down and hit it, blew it up. And this year's narrative was essentially the forces that had been fighting there, escaping the system as it implodes, and finding this new system. And the new system this is kind of the setup for it. So we're moving into a new phase of the campaigns, a new narrative, again spearheaded by Mike and Greg. And yeah, at this point, I'm just really happy to see all the things that Mike and Greg have brought to it. Mike, Greg, and Cody built the tables. They've worked on all the background stuff. Mike has been instrumental in growing it so much better than I was able to. But I love the fact that we are getting people coming in from all over the U.S. to come play at our event. We had Duncan, we had Jack. Last year we had several guys from Texas. We had John, Lucas, Dan was there.
Dan was there.
Not
this year. No. Dan decided he was too good for us this year to come south of the Mason-Dixon line.
Well, it's Dan.
That's
Well, if I say it on the internet, it must be true. So
it's funny because now I get to cut that. Specifically, I might record, this has been a test of the emergency heresy broadcast system. In the case of actual heresy, Gulliman would still be sitting in the 500 worlds. I repeat, this has been only a test.
That feels very appropriate.
You could say it was redacted by order of the Emperor.
See,
I'm not sorry.
Now I've got
I'm not sorry.
Now I've just got fun space to make jokes in, and we can press forward now.
All right, thank you, Joe.
More importantly, thank you, Joe, for everything you've done for the hobby, getting this up and going. Sincerely.
Yeah, it was a great event last year. It was a great event a couple years ago at another smaller hotel that we were at. I don't remember where that hotel was in Nashville. I think that was 2018 or 2019. I'm not sure which. It was when Ryan Kimmel was still playing, but that was a good event.
That would have been 2017 or 2018. That was a small venue.
2017, 2018 was when we were at the smaller venue.
Okay.
To be honest, just to you guys and listeners, 2019 was a crap year. Dave and I were both dealing with a lot of stuff, real life stuff. So it just wasn't a very good event that year. That's actually when Mike and Greg kind of after that approached me. It was like, hey, do you want some help with this? And I said, yes, I would. So I am very grateful to see where it's going. I'm glad to still be around kicking. They made me play Ringer, which was great this year because I got to have the best game of Music City Heresy, which was my game with Mr. Duncan, where I was able to successfully choom a Contemptor to death when it tried to assault the Immortals, and then he took revenge and murdered all of my other models. But high points, low points.
Killed Dreadnought, doesn't matter. Emotional victory.
So
I think the most important part of that game for me was making certain that your Iron Father lost his head, just like his father did.
Well, he thought that running forward into the middle of all of the enemy without any support was the best course of action, just like his dad. And it went about the same way as it did for his dad, So staying true to the story.
Yeah, it fits the lore.
So before we dig too deep into the rest of the heresy game, what happened, I have a question because I don't know, people who have listened to RFI back in the day probably have heard this story, but I was really amazed at one thing that the con had. And this is the convention that I believe it's not Kingdom Death, was it Kings of War? Brings in a giant cage and they fight their feature matches in a cage with a boxing ring, and they fight their featured matches in the boxing ring and cage matches. So did they have the cage matches set up in there again?
They did. So they are actually Kings of War. That the event that was at the other smaller tournament thing, and now is at NashCon, is pro wrestling themed. So
those dudes go hard.
They go super hard. We saw a Stone Cold Steve Austin. Roddy Piper came back from the grave.
Yep, I saw him.
Their trophies are championship belts. There's also luchador masks, and they're
of course.
So other years they had like for the top first and second place tables, they would have somebody in the squared circle, and this year and the last few years at NashCon, they've had a cage match. So they literally get up into a wrestling ring and a cage match to play their championship games.
I distinctly remember from last year watching a dude take his army up into the cage wearing nothing but Daisy Dukes and fight it out against a dude in a unicorn onesie, and I'm just like, they're cool. Don't need to start anything there. We're good.
They are very dedicated to their theme, and it's always amazing. Though it's in the Age of Sigmar tournament, I did see someone running the whatever the giants are, whatever they're called now. But he literally had an 8-inch tall pimp giant with a fur coat and a scepter, pimping through Age of Sigmar and a top hat. Yeah, it was amazing.
Did he have a cane?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That is official.
So the other thing that I thought was real last year, it was Mike Lee, right? Has written some Horus Heresy, other Games Workshop was there playing historical games. I don't remember what it was, but he had a bunch of like dudes on elephants and stuff, like small scale stuff. But I know he stopped by and had given us some swag and stuff. Was he around this year?
He's there every year. I don't know if he stopped by this year. Last year, Mike was gracious enough to actually bring us some of his books that he'd written and signed a few of them. I have his Dark Angel book that he wrote. I have the hardback of it that he signed, and he signed it Loyal AF, Mike Lee. So Mike Lee is awesome. I love seeing him every year. I try to hunt him down and give him a cigar every year, but he's usually there playing historical stuff.
Yeah, I was in the middle of something else, so I got an Age of Sigmar book, I think Vampire, but he was really cool. A couple different times.
I didn't see him pop into the room this year, sadly.
Yeah, I didn't see him either. But we also had one of the doors closed that we normally had open, but we had it closed because we had more tables this year. That's one of the great things about it is we've been expanding it every year. It's gotten a little bit bigger. Just
I
always
think
great
this year
to see.
was actually at maximum capacity for the room, if I'm not wrong.
We were, yes. We had sold out. A few weeks before the event itself, and that room was full. Yep.
Glad to hear it.
And it was definitely a fun event and a lot of fun people. And I saw some new people there actually who I hadn't seen there last year, so that was cool too.
Yeah, we had a lot of new faces, new to us faces that came in. I think. Other than, as far as Nashville people, I think we had maybe 3 or 4 people from Nashville, not including those of us running it. But everyone else was coming from Chattanooga, coming in from Clarksville. We had people from Kentucky. One guy from Kentucky, though, he kept sleeping on the floor. I think we have video of that.
Will came from Texas.
Almost up there with the Ryan at Adepticon moment of, hey, y'all want to see a dead body?
Yup. Yep. We have someone comes in and takes some professional pictures, and there is definitely some professional footage of Jack taking a nap on the floor, which I am very eager to see. But yeah, we had Will came up from Texas, we had several beautiful armies. Will had his really awesome Thousand Suns. Everybody's armies were amazing this year. Duncan, did you do anything interesting there? Did you get anything? I can't remember.
Well, I handed out a lot of stickers for the Heresy group, for the Heresy Accountability Buddies. I pretty much ran out of the stickers that I had. I think Jack may still have a few left, but we ran out of the rest of them. And for some reason, I got this Herald of Music City award at the end of everything on Saturday that was for best overall paint and theme, which I was delighted to accept. Especially since it also comes with $25 of free paint. So I have to figure out what paint I want. But yeah, I'm really kind of really kind of happy with that for my Sons of Horus that I did. Really proud of them.
Congrats, dude. Yeah, I won it last year. You deserve it.
Thank you, sir. I'm really proud of how everything turned out. The only thing that I'm not satisfied with on the stuff I've produced is I think I could do a little bit more on the bases, but as they are right now, it will work, obviously. I guess I'll talk about games then. I got to play a game with Joe. The first game I've ever played against Joe. I played that on Friday. It was really pleasant. I've played games against Dan, Jacob, Jack, and John, but I'd never played against Joe. So I got to have one of those finally, and it was fun. We sat there, we have a good back and forth. He kept shooting at me. I kept trying to move towards him to engage him in close combat, and it didn't quite work as well until finally it did. And then the Reavers turned into Ginsu knives, and everything got cut up, and that was fun. Then I played a second game on Friday against Jack when he woke up, and I think that was actually Jack's first full game of Heresy in Heresy 2.0. I will also preface this with my game with Joe was my first full game of Heresy, because everything before that has lasted 2 rounds, 2.5 rounds, 1.5 rounds, not even totaling a full game. But Jack and I had fun in our game, I think. Again, Reavers, Ginsu knives, fun. Day 2, sorry, because there was no day 3. Day 2.
You forgot about on day 1.
Oh, the Contemptor cage fight. Yes.
And the Zone Mortalis mega battle.
I didn't participate in the mega battle, so I can't really speak to that, but I think Joe can. Joe?
So the ZM mega battle, so narratively, the games on Friday were the forces escaping from the old system. Basically, they were in such a rush to escape, several of them ended up on the same ships. So they were trying to escape on a ship while also fighting for control of it. So that was what the ZM games were. Some crash landed on smaller planets and then we're trying to struggle to get enough resources to leave the planet and get to the new system. That's what the Centurion was. The ZM mega battle was everyone, the forces converging on a massive Arc Mechanicum, attempting to take control of it to spearhead their launch into this new system. And the way it was set up was, I think it came out to 12 feet of ZM. Every player, there was a piece of tape about a foot apart, and every player could deploy because in the new ZM rules, you have to have an access point that you enter in, not just a board edge. So every player had 6 inches on each side, so a 12-foot bubble or 12-inch bubble where they could deploy their stuff, and it worked out really well. It flowed really good. Greg was spearheading that, so each side was limited to 15 minutes to get their whole turn done. Even though everybody's kind of new to this edition, it was still like you got to be paying attention to what you're doing so we can get this done, because you've got. I mean, we had probably 20 people on per side, or well, I think about a dozen people per side fighting it out, and it was a lot of fun. Jake from the I think he has a podcast. I'm not sure.
Who is this Jake?
Covenant of Fire. I think I've heard about it before. I don't know if it's a real thing.
State Farm?
No, not from State Farm.
Neverland Pirate?
Yeah, I think his current name is Cletus McGillicuddy. He keeps losing his name at NashCon. I don't know why. We try to help him not, but he keeps losing his name for some weird reason. But he was next to me, and every time his Space Wolves would run towards something, I would turn around, and by the time I looked back, his Space Wolves were gone. So I don't know what he was doing. I think he kept finding airlocks or something, So it was a great time. It was a huge, insane melee from everybody, and it launched. It determined who got to pick in the first round on Saturday.
Right. So I guess that kind of goes into Saturday.
Contender?
Yeah, you're right. Contender cage match. You're right. I keep trying to skip ahead of that because of how much punching that was. There were 4 rounds of contemptors entering a arena ring. Started off with groups of 4. First group had 2 additional wounds per contemptor. Second group had 1 additional wound per contemptor. And the third group had no additional wounds. So there were only 3 groups. My bad, not 4. And every contemptor in the first group started off equidistant in the 4 cardinal points on a compass in this ring. And
squared circle.
Yes. Well, yeah, the squared circle, but it was more of a circle.
It was a circled circle.
Yeah.
Circle.
Yeah.
And we rolled for initiative depending on who got the high roll, and then people started charging one another and shooting one another. And Joe, for some reason, was sitting there minding his own business when Cletus ran up to him with his dreadnought and started trying to punch him. And it was really rude.
It was very rude, but a very nice Iron Warrior ran into the ring and helped me beat up the Space Wolf. And at that point, we formed the Iron Bros. And basically, it became one of the greatest wrestling shows of all time. The Iron Bros, we both died, so I guess it wasn't that great. But it was a lot of fun. It was something that Mike and Greg had come up with to pit basically every turn a new set of contemptors comes in, and because almost everybody's got Brutal 3 because they've got a power fist, you're just watching dreadnoughts explode.
So it's like the Royal Rumble of
Oh, it is, yes.
So it's like every 3 minutes it's like, who's running down the ramp?
Yes.
Exactly. And it was great.
That was a lot of fun. My dreadnought got blown up by a Thousand Suns dreadnought activating magical mind stuff and carving a hole in mine when I was busy trying to punch him in the face. But it was okay because I enjoyed watching it. And I think the overall winner was strangely fitting, was a Blood Angel jump dreadnought coming off the top rope and knocking out the last remaining other dreadnought with his claws. So that was kind of funny.
He did. And I actually ran up to the Blood Angel. As soon as he entered the ring, I ran up and got him down to 1 wound, and then he still managed to win that cage match. You can never know. You never know what's going to happen in the ring.
All I know is off the top rope, the Blood Angel Contemptor did an elbow drop on somebody and won the whole thing. That's all that matters.
So nobody cashed into the Money in Bank contract at the end. Surprised the brief audience.
Well, so in a way they did. Matt Callis, he won that. He won that event with his epic top rope atomic elbow. And the prize for it was a Leviathan dreadnought. So he is now the proud owner of the plastic Leviathan dreadnought kit. That was donated to us from our local gaming store, Comic City 2, up in Madison, Rivergate area in Tennessee. But yeah, so he managed to do his fancy flying around vampire stuff, and I guess he sparkled so much that we all died, and now he has a sexy new Leviathan.
And that was definitely fun to watch and definitely fun to participate in. So now I guess it would be time to move on to game 2.
Now rest day.
Sorry, day 2. Yeah, not game 2. Jeez. I got my first round was with a guy who most of us know fairly well, Jake Bussey.
Let's do a little back on it before we jump into our games. Day 2's was classic loyalists versus traitors. Everybody was divided up into teams. Duncan was obviously a traitor. I was obviously a loyalist. They did alternating. Loyalists would pick the tables first round. Traitors would pick the mission. and then the traders would come in and pick whatever board they thought with whatever loyalist that was on the board and play that game. And then round 2 was the opposite of that, and then round 3 we went back to that. So in this case, Cletus McFarland was sitting at a table, or Cletus, what is his last name now?
McGillicuddy.
McGillicuddy. Sorry, Cletus McGillicuddy, the second, was sitting at the ice table, and Duncan went, burp, 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 burp. I haven't played you yet. Let's do this thing. And Cletus McGillicuddy III went, cool deal. Let's do this, son. Now you can go, Duncan.
Thank you. And I'll give a bit of background also to the whole the name thing. Last year at Music City Heresy, Jacob and Jake Bussey had a game, and I think it was Joe who said that it was for the right to be named Jake. And Jake Bussey lost the game and lost the rights to be called Jake anymore. And what was his name for the past year, Joe? Do you remember?
Thaddeus. Yes, I partway through their game, without either of them knowing, I declared that since they were both Jakes, the winner gets to keep their name, and the loser has to take a new name. Jacob immediately asked, but I don't go by Jake, and I said, well, you have to if you win. So, yeah.
I mean, that's true.
Yeah.
So I walked up and I said, I've never played Jake. I want to play Jake. This will be fun. So he had his he had his salamanders, and I had my Sons of Horus. I don't remember Jake's entire list, but my list was a Praetor, a Chaplain, a Master of Signal, 2 Contemptors with Choom and Fists, 2 packs of Reavers in Proteus Land Raiders, 2 Despoiler Squads in Rhinos, 3 of the Javelin Speeders with Multi-Multi and Missile, and a tactical support squad of 8 guys with the Calivers. During our game, the Caliver guys did almost nothing and got killed, which I was really proud of them. They were hanging out with the Master Signal because I wanted to give him, or have him give the bonus to their ballistic skill to make them useful, and they honestly just weren't. But Jake and I ended up having a really fun slap fight of his Fire Drakes versus my Reavers. Spoiler, the Reavers won. Then my second pack of Reavers had a slap fight with a thing of Pyroclasts and won that one, and then got eaten up by his the flyer.
Fire Raptor?
Yes, his Fire Raptor.
Okay.
His Fire Raptor came in and murdered them right in the face, really well. After shooting, I rolled terribly and I broke, and then he charged me with his Leviathan, and I rolled terribly and continued being broken, and them and my Praetor got run off the table and eaten by the Leviathan, who the next turn was charged by my Contemptor, who ate the Leviathan. And it was fun. It came down to kill points, and I won that way. And that was when Joe declared that the winner got to pick whatever Jake's new name was going to be. And it took me a while to think of a really good name for Jake. So I think it was during my second game that I determined that Jake's new name needed to be Cletus McGillicuddy. So that's Jake for the next year.
Man, Cletus is going to be real upset with me if I don't make Music City next year, huh?
I mean, he's got to get a chance to win his name back. You've got to give him that chance.
Do I, though? Do I?
No, you don't.
Well, I mean, I would kind of hope you would, out of kindness.
Might even it up for him next year and let him have a Warhound on a Sky Shield landing pad, just to give him a fighting chance.
With Void Shield Generator.
Ooh, we're going there. We really went there.
And no arms. Bringing it back around.
And a T-Sun Contemptor and a Raven Guard Contemptor.
Jack, how was your first game?
My first game was fantastic. I played against Steven, who's a member of our group and listens to the podcast. So, what up, Steven? Again, thank you for the great game. He was playing Jet Bike and Jet Infantry Night Lords. I don't remember exactly everything in his list. He had like 6 Jet Bikes, a Saber with the neutron cannon, one group of Outriders with like plasma troop squads and a Charybdis, and another troop squad and a Storm Eagle. Yeah, it was a tough game. It was a fun game. He ended up, handing me my butt. I made it very costly for him once I finally got in there. But it was a great game. I was playing Ultramarines, couple of tax squads, Punisher Scaring, a Suzerain squad, a Praetorian squad, two Contemptors, a Leviathan, and a couple of Land Raiders. So he was up in my face turn one and didn't stop until the time was called. He ended up getting a major victory on that, and then that led us to game number two. Duncan, you want to start in your game number two?
You carry on with your game number two, and
I'll carry on
I'll
with my
pick up
game
for
number
that.
two. For that one, I went outside, picked a mission that was table quarters and objectives. I'm like, I got 4 scoring. How bad could it be? Well, little did I know, the guy that I played against had World Eaters, and yeah, he met the challenge. His name was Michael. He had a very nice World Eaters list. It was 2 assault squads, going across the board, the Spoiler Squad, and a Land Raider Spartan. Their new was it Rampagers, I think is the name of the unit. That squad, and then a Leviathan with double drill fingers coming down in a Charybdis, and then 2 Contemptors and Dreadnought drop pods. That Leviathan put in work for him. I thought answers in my list for it between his rolling, my rolling, and it just being in the right spot. It did some work. It took out a Contemptor, my Leviathan, and a Sakaran Punisher before I could finally bring it down. I was able to get my Caesarians out and take care of the Rampager squads. With Caesarians are a lot. Like, I know people are saying that they're good. I took that a little like, let me see first. They're kind of scary, kind of very scary in my opinion. Especially when you're able to put them in a right spot at the right time. But Michael was a great guy, great game. He ended up with, I think, a minor victory. I could be mistaken on that one, but he's very enthusiastic about his World Eaters list. He has a whole entire backstory, which I wish I could repeat for you right now, about where they're from, what they mean, what everything means on them, what he's planning on doing with them. So very much in love with the hobby, which is something that I very much appreciate. Great guy again. I can't say that enough. So Duncan, what about your game too?
My second game was with Matthew Callis, and he was playing Alpha Legion, and I had my same 3,000 point list. He had what I can best describe as a parking lot. He had a Fellblade, multiple sabers with neutrons, multiple predators with predator cannons, an Arcus, an HQ Sakaran, a non-HQ Sakaran, some more predators with plasma, and the Whirlwind Scorpius with that's the Whirlwind Scorpius, and a Outrider plasma squad of 4 guys who were outflanking. And luckily, the table that I picked was one that had a giant volcano split in half on it that cut the table really well to where I could hide everything behind this volcano, and he couldn't see me. Our mission was 7 points for being in the opponent's deployment zone, 5 points for being in the no man's land between the deployment zones, and 3 points for being in your own deployment zone, followed with kill points being the tiebreaker. And I literally sat there, gave my squad of Volkite guys right out in the front to give them a chance to go do something, which they did. They got shot. But he didn't kill the Master Signal, who ran forward and hid behind a rock. I went second, so the first thing I did was pop. He moved some predators forward after eradicating the squad of guys, but not the Master Signal. My Master Signal ran forward and hid behind a rock, like I said. My 3 speeders popped over the rock, over the volcano, went forward, started shooting predators, destroyed 2 predators, charged a 3rd predator, and was punching that in the rear. He started coming around the sides. I started moving one Land Raider to each side and started shooting at tanks with glass cannons, and he started firing back. It was fun. He killed both my Contemptors in the end, but one of them was running around punching tanks to death with his fist. His Fellblade, it's a Fellblade. They're going to do work. It killed Contemptor, and it killed other dudes, and it killed a speeder, but it didn't quite make its points back. But everything else he had was doing a lot of work with my stuff until I started finally getting the big threats to my armor value 14 out of the way. I ended up winning that one on kill points because we were tied. We both had stuff in the no man's land. We both had stuff in our own deployment zone. And so it came down, like I said, to kill points. It was a really fun game. I would happily play him again anytime. That was just a really good game. So I won that one with a minor victory. And then I had a burger that for lunch. That the best thing I could say about that was that it was warm.
Kind of warm.
Kind of warm. Yeah, kind of warm. And then I had my third game against, I'm trying to remember who it was I decided to play for my third game. Jack, do you remember who I had my third game with?
I know the person that I played my third game against is a bit of a bleep face because I try to keep this nice here. Nobody I would ever play again. He was cranky. He was miserable. I'm pretty sure he was hiding dice. Just a really miserable SOB.
Man, that sucks. I'm sorry you had a game against that kind of guy.
We had a lot of complaints about that table. I had to keep coming over there and checking on him. It was pretty bad. Pretty bad.
I can believe it. My opponent for my third game was I would generously call them a person. I think, although that may be up for debate. I'm not really sure. They may be a mineral or a plant, but I'm not really quite certain. I think they're a carbon-based life form, but I'm not sure. So please don't quote me on that. They were. I think I've seen them at events a couple times. I don't think I remember playing them very often before, if ever. But they had an Ultramarines army. They had some Suzerains.
That is unfortunate. Keep going.
I'm scared.
I'm curious. What's the unfortunate part, Jake?
They were playing Ultra.
Yeah. They were. It was really just not. I mean, not even fluffy. I mean, they weren't even involved in the heresy, pretty much.
Yeah, I used to play them. I got better.
Thank you. We appreciate that. But he had some Suzerains. Well, actually, I'm not gonna say he. I'm just gonna say they. They had Suzerains. They had a champion in the Suzerains. They had some apothecaries. They had 2 Land Raider Proteuses. They had the other specialist Ultramarine squad and the other one with a Praetor. They had a pair of Contemptors. They had a Leviathan, some tactical squads, and a Xiphon. And I will happily state that for the first time in all the games, the Volkite Caliver squad did some work, because when their Xiphon came in, I did get to intercept them, and I caused 2 hull points with the Calivers. And then on my turn, bottom of my turn 2, I did shoot the Calivers apart or the Xiphon and killed it, and it crashed pretty much straight down and did nothing. But he blew up my first Land Raider with his very first last cannon shot from his Land Raider, and dumped a pile of Reavers out, who ended up getting charged by a Contemptor, and who ended up eating the Contemptor, but that was the last round of combat at the end of the game. And there were, I think, 2 or 3 of my Reavers left, along with the chaplain. There was a bit of a slap fight with his Suzerains and my squad of Reavers. My other squad of Reavers with my Praetor. My Praetor killed his champion, and his champion killed my Praetor, both at the same time, because of Paragon Blade nastiness. And then he ended up eating that squad of Reavers. He kept making a point that his apothecaries were going to do all of the work in that combat, and his apothecaries killed, I think, 1 Reaver. So it was very nice to see that he was right. His apothecaries were very good. My despoiler squads kind of got eaten by everything else out there. I discovered that Vexula's, well, I'll talk about that after we get done. It was fun. I lost that game. My opponent got a minor victory, and yeah, it was an okay game. He was just he was mediocre at being a human. I'll leave it at that. Jack, how did your game go?
Well, I played this jerk. Speed rolling dice. His dice really weren't like clearly marked, so I really don't know what he rolled like half the time. Like he kept telling me stuff, and this trying to be a good sport, I just went with it because I'm there to have a good time. You know how it is. He had like some like Sons of Horrors close combat. Something about him hitting like at like initiative 5 or weapon skill 5 and -1 strength or toughness to my dudes where I couldn't double him out and making it harder to wound. He shot my Xiphon. That was kind of sad, but I had that there just to see what all I could do this weekend. So no big loss there. I was happy that my contemptors were able to hold off some of his stuff as much as possible. And then that jerk turned around and like won some award at the end of it. I think he bribed the judges. I really truly do with like bourbon and L8. He bought that award.
He probably did. You're probably right. But I'm glad that the two of us got to finish our game in full for the first time in Heresy.
First time. It was a really good game.
It really was.
So Duncan, you had a ride home, or
I did have a ride home, and it was really, really uncomfortably quiet most of the ride back to Kentucky, but it was okay.
I did have a new home for him. I did rehome him for a few minutes while I was down there, but then I thought better of it. He has a daughter.
I mean, that's true. And after that, we had the award ceremony. Actually, no, let's not skip this. Joe, what were the results for the new system?
What do you mean for the new system?
Well, we as the narrative, we've moved from the Circulus Ignis to this new system, and the Traitors won Friday night, and the Loyalists, I believe, won Saturday day.
They did, yes.
So what's that going to mean for next year?
Next year, what that means is since it's essentially a tie in that instance, means both sides are establishing their footholds, and next year is going to see us kind of escalating the fighting in this system. So the first day, the Traitors were able to take the lead. The second day, the Loyalists came back and won that day, but the Traitors were not defeated as well enough as the Loyalists would hope they would be. So we'll see what happens again next year.
I definitely look forward to seeing what you all come up with for next year.
Yep. I do know that on Friday of next year, the Loyalists are taking a 1 point advantage. Not 100% sure what that means yet because they don't have everything figured out for next year, but that's to be entertaining.
It's definitely going to be fun. And after that, we did not have a mega battle, actually, because there weren't really enough people who wanted to participate in it. So everyone who was there just kind of lined up their super heavies they brought, and we did a photo finish for the Photo Award, which is an award that was originally started by Covenant of Fire and given out last year, and it stands for off, tank off. And we had, I think, 5 or 6 participants, or maybe it was just Jack having like 5 or 6 super heavies in the lineup. I can't really remember.
It was you, it was me, it was Cletus McGillicuddy the Fifth, the Alpha Legion player who you played, Will, I think is his name, you said? Will with his, and then I think his name is Bill. He was about as big around as my thumb.
Actually, the guy I played was Matt.
Matt, okay.
Yep. And I do know they had to go from 2 judges originally judging it. They had to pull in a ringer judge to get a third person opinion. And I believe it was down to you and Matt with his freehand snakes and chains for his Alpha Legion.
Yep.
And who ended up taking that one? What was it?
I was lucky enough to pull away the I guess judge's choice for Big Tank. I don't know how else to politically call it without making Jake hit the beat button a lot more. But it was that. So I won a trophy and I won some golden cojones.
Truck cojones.
Golden truck cojones.
You deserve it, man. Like I said, I much like Duncan's award. I won that one last year with the super heavy walker, and I was hoping to get my drill done for Music to Heresy, but life got in the way. But you definitely deserve.
Thank you, sir.
Put some definite work into those Ultramarines.
Thank you.
You couldn't have picked a better Legion either. I mean, it's such a great Legion with a bunch of history
it's a fantastic Legion, and it's literally the gold standard. In this case, the blue and gold standard.
Absolutely.
What did they do again? I don't remember
Everything.
them actually doing anything though. Like,
They got beaten on by the word bearers.
oh, those are the guys who had a second heresy. That's what that was. Yeah,
they're the ones who started their own breakaway Imperium, because the first Imperium wasn't good enough for them.
We were the light in the dark.
That tracks. Yeah, they thought they were better than everyone else, and then
they were greatest number of compliant planets
until they got ravaged by the World Eaters and Word Bearers.
Yeah, the World Eaters and Word Bearers got together and said, you know what, that Gilliman guy, he's acting up, and he needs to be put in his place. I think that's how it happened. Yeah,
sounds about right to me.
Anyway, thoughts and opinions taking away from the con. Because Duncan and Joe will go on forever if we let them. The con itself is great. We'll go back again next year. 10 out of 10 would recommend. If you're not there, you're square. You get the idea. Greg and them throw on a great show. They're very much want to make it bigger and better for next year, and bigger and better every year after there. So thank to that team there for throwing on a great show.
Yeah, I can't disagree with that at all. Thanks to Joe for founding it and starting it off, and thanks to Greg and Mike, and I think Cody for kind of taking and running with it some more. And it was just, last year was good. The first one we went to in 17-18 was fun. We did get to see a wild David Sampson appearance, which was really shocking, but I was happy to see him. And it was fun, definitely what I think was needed. And I will happily go back again next year and get my ticket the day it comes out, because it's just fun.
Joe, did we have a date for next year?
I am not sure just yet. As soon as I do, we'll start posting it on social media.
But they do help run the ATC Heresy track, and that's the last weekend of July. Narrative-wise, we tie in a bit to it because the systems are kind of adjacent to each other. We're as far as I know, we're not actually involved with the ATC stuff, but we do go down there and play with them. So
okay.
The guy that I think does it was theirs, and he was in with that group, so I thought it was just all one big group.
Yeah, he was. Yeah, the guy that runs the ATC stuff was there. He was there, but yeah.
Okay. And everything that we did this weekend did tie into the Beta Garmin subplot that is going on online right now with all of those games. So everything we fought for this weekend accounts to that global campaign.
Yes.
Yeah, I believe Alex has added something to the Beta Garmin site, so you can add your games from this weekend to a special section with the Beta Garmin.
Definitely planning on doing that probably after the cast is finished recording tonight. And I will happily encourage anyone who went to do the same, because it just adds more flavor and more plot to an overall global campaign that's going on that's fun for everyone involved.
Yep, absolutely.
Any takeaways from playing games that you picked out, or things you thought were going to be really useful that weren't, Jack?
I not to speak for both of us, but I'm going to speak for both of us a little bit. The Vexillas weren't as needed as we thought across the board. We both ran very similar Dreadnought loadouts with a Fist and Volkite. Both of us felt it was kind of lacking towards the end of the day. You had spikes and damages here and there, but for something reliable, not necessarily what you want day in and day out. From my perspective, Ultramarines are definitely have some tools in the toolbox. I have my own personal, thought about, how many and what of everybody, what should be run for a fun game. I personally will probably never run more than 10 of the Caesarians in a game, because they get stuck in and they're just there for a while, slowly whittling away people. It's not a quick wham bam, they're out the door, but they stay there, they put in work, and they'll generally come out the other side.
Do you find that they kind of lost Murderous Strike, so they're still that good?
Yes.
Yeah. With the number of attacks you get off the charge, or just number of base attacks they get, it's a little bit on the ridiculous side. With I ran 8 axes and 2 hammers, so that was 24. Let's see, 16, 24, 28. I think 4 times 8, 32. 32 axe attacks on this regular turn. If I haven't lost anybody, it's just. Yeah. I'm afraid any more than that in the game wouldn't be fun.
So, did you get hit by any of the disordered charge reactions, or was Duncan shooting more?
I got hit with that once with the World Eaters player, and I still end up taking out the Rampager squad, and at the end of his turn.
Cool.
So it's I feel like it's one of those units that you have to use like a soft hammer with in order to make sure people have a good game.
I will say that the Sons of Horus trait that gives you -1 to your strength on the first round of combat when charged or charging definitely helped me survive against the Suzerains. Him hitting me on 4s was fine. Him having to wound me on 5s with those power axe things, that definitely helped me to survive the first round of combat there. That said, my Reaver squads apparently are very, very chewy. I ate a squad of Fire Drakes in pretty much 1 turn, just based on the massive number of attacks. And the Suzerains were beefy, and they ended up running that squad down after, I think, was it 2 or 3 rounds of actual combat, Jack?
2.
And from what I understand, the Rampager squad was all dual phalanx blades, and the Suzerains did the same thing to them. So non-invulnerable save really needs to watch out for them, because they definitely can be punching above their price cost.
Yeah.
How many points did that squad cost you, Jack?
With everything I had in it, this for the squad itself was $395, I think.
Yeah.
And I feel like I got my points back out of it every game. The Leviathan, though, I don't know if people think that is scary or not, since it's like a big dreadnought. It's not. It spent most of its game just trying to get close enough to hug somebody. Once it finally did, it did work. Once it finally connected with somebody, but this took too long getting there over the course of the 2 games that I was able to get into close combat with somebody. So the Land Raiders were solid. Rhinos did what Rhinos do. Tax Squads did what Tax Squads do. The Xiphon running cap. At least there didn't see anybody putting any high dollar units in a Charybdis. Probably because the non-reliability of it coming in. So the Xiphon flying cap is kind of, your mileage may vary on that one. I'll probably never do it again, other than the fact that I really like the model itself. That would be why I would kick it in. Night Lords with Fear. Fear is no joke. That caught me flat-footed on my Praetorian Guard squad. Ended up picking up all of them along with my Praetor by losing by 1 point. I lost by 2 points on my leadership. Yeah, so a lot of good learnings on it. What about you, Duncan?
Thoughts are the same, pretty much on what I was kind of thinking before. I'm definitely going to keep the land speeders, because they're really good. They're not quite as good as they used to be in some ways, but in other ways they're actually better. The fact that they can't just be taken out by 1 melt-a-gun or 1 las cannon or 1 autocannon blowing it up or killing it, with them being cavalry, was really helpful. The fact that they can charge and soak that reaction fire and then allow whatever my other charge unit is that's going into whatever my target is to do anything and actually get the charge bonus there really helps. Contemptor Chain Fists, I think, are kind of a waste. I think just the Power Fist is overall a better option with the Brutal 3 there, as opposed to the possibility of Murderous Strike. I'm also pretty sure that I'm not going to use Chum on dreads any longer. I'm probably going to switch those out to autocannons because I think the autocannons give you a bit more function against stuff, because my chum guns couldn't really hurt the front of predators, and that definitely was a thing I was trying to do with them, and I couldn't, and that definitely was something they were lacking in. That said, I also think I'm going to pull all my power axes off my apothecaries, because I'm using the apothecaries in like my Reaver squads or the Chieftain squad I'm going to start here in a day or two, and I don't really see any actual use out of leaving that power axe on the weapon skill 4 guy. And I just think I'll pull those from them and the Vexillas from everybody, and use those points somewhere else to do more upgrades to other things that might actually help them survive. But that said, it's early days yet in the Heresy, in Heresy 2.0, and it was a great event, good games, lots of fun things to see, nice, beautiful armies to watch, and loved the event overall. And I think, other than Joe, that'll if Joe has any closing thoughts about Music City Heresy, I think that'll pretty much sum it all up for us.
I just want to say that I'm happy to see the event growing. It's in really good hands. I'm still on helping a bit. Just life and families making it hard for me to be able to do as much as I used to with it, but it's in great hands. Mike and Greg and Cody, they're doing an amazing job on it. I'm very happy to see it. I'll be there again next year as the unofficial mascot / guy to blame stuff on if it goes wrong. But yeah, just happy to see everybody out there. Glad we had fun. Glad we were able to do it again. Really glad to get a game again against Duncan. It's actually the first time in the history of Music City Heresy that I have played a game. So that was really nice. Thank you guys for coming out. Glad you enjoyed it.
Thank you, sir.
Glad to have been there. So what's next on our agenda? Talking about the releases, or
Yeah, I think we can do that before we segue into talking about the Thousand Suns. What did we get previewed this week? I know that on our 14th episode, we may have caught that on the back end of the episode, talking about the Emperor's Children Praetor that we got, that has like the underbarrel Volkite. Did we talk about that at the tail end of last episode, or is somebody more up to date on what's been put up for pre-order or what's been shown off this week?
So I think we missed that talking about that Emperor's Children, but I definitely think it's a cool model. The head, has been memed reminds me a lot of the tanker beetle from Starship Troopers. I think it looks a little more Thousand Suns to Emperor's Children. But as far as this week drops, we got the preview of the Plastic Land Raider. It was definitely cool. You can build it both armored and transport capacity. Today we got dropped that the Echoes of Eternity, Aaron Dembski-Bowden Siege of Terra book number 8, is coming out, limited to 2,500 copies. There's a fold-out map this time. And the audio book and the paperback are dropping on the same day as the hardcover. There's some Chaos Possessed and Chaos Possessed cultists for putting together your demon armies that are coming soon. There's a really cool set of Chaos dice with the 4-pointed with the stars in it. And yesterday, officially dropped was the pre-orders for all the Aeronautica Heresy stuff, and according to all the local game stores, was sold out in roughly a minute and a half. Because every store that I talked to was unable to pre-order me a copy, and I was on the road getting to my Heresy games at the time that the pre-order still live, so I missed it entirely myself. So I'm going to be camping out in front of the Citadel next Saturday to get my copies. But that's everything that we've got coming out so far that came out through books and through the previews.
Yeah, and I do want to make sure that I drop a note as we talk about this week's release. We did get the EPUB for the Mechanicum book. We haven't gotten the full physical release. We're still, owing to the fact that I think we're a significant majority Marine players, we're still kind of sifting through what that book is and what it means and how we feel about that. And we want to make sure that when we do come to the table to talk about that we've got a little bit of time and experience to be able to have a little more developed opinions. We know there's some bold reactions to that publication right now. And we want to make sure that we know as much as we can know.
Resting and digesting. Yeah, there's been some very extreme partisanship on reactions so far. Let's say that.
I will say that during the event this weekend that I played, one of the guys did bring a night list at 3,000 points and at 1,500 points. And at 3,000 points, he had 15 armatures.
Oh,
Yeah, he had no actual knights, and his we talked a little bit after the game, and he said that ironically, putting in a couple of real knights would have probably been nicer. That the shooting knights, the autocannon knights, because they can't take the lightning cannon or the Chum baby knights in the knight list. Those are specifically Mechanicum only now, so you're not going to see those in mass. He said that the autocannons did work. They have a couple different fire modes, and they were just punching tickets left and right. And they were really good in combat as well. But he said that if you kind of balance it out, it would perform a little better. That because of the balancing we've seen with vehicles, that he thinks that little knights would have been, actual knights wouldn't have been as bad. And maybe even putting in some of the resin ones like the Lancer or not the Castigator, because the Castigator got a heck of a buff. He said
the Arcarion,
yeah,
the big flamer,
yeah, that one as well. Those two he said would probably be okay throwing into a night list, just to supplement some of the armigers. But he said 16 armigers, since he doesn't have to worry about nightly ranks, he doesn't have to worry about HQs. He just takes his troops and plays his games. He said it was a pretty fun, interesting game, but could have gone a lot better.
I've seen some guys talking about playing night list already this weekend in some of the groups that I'm in, and I have questions. Like everybody else, they say they're supposed to be roughly, the armigers are supposed to be roughly analogous to the a contemptor, but like because they're not a contemptor, the rules don't work the same way.
Yeah, they don't have some of the dreadnought buffs. So they don't have. I think there's immunity. They have immunity to instant death, but there's a couple of things that they don't get that dreadnoughts get.
They're just stubborn comes to mind.
Yeah. But yeah, we need some more time to look through it. And I'll talk to that local night player, see if he wants to divulge some more information on the cast for us next.
Yeah. So I think does that cover our previews and releases for the week?
I think that's pretty much everything.
Yeah, there wasn't anything really announced for Forge World. I mean, there were, as I think, like we had the Emperor's Children guy, Praetor, and then I think that Dark Angel, the named Dreadwing guy, was last week.
Fair Threadloss. I think that's his name.
Starts with an M.
Oh, then I don't remember.
Medusan? No, not Medusan. The Dark Angel guy.
Dude with the funky sword and the huge plasma gun.
Yes. Yeah. And we talked about the Land Raider, right?
Yep.
So, I think that's really all that's been announced or been said by GW.
What are y'all's thoughts on the Land Raider? I'm a little iffy on it. It's not. I don't know if I like the resin better. I mean, obviously, I've got a conversion I built to make old Land Raiders into the Proteus, but I was kind of curious what y'all thought about it, or if we want to wait till we get the kit for that.
I think for me, because I have four that I've got four Mark IIBs that I'm getting ready to build. I'm kind of like, it really depends on how much they price them. I mean, like, if they keep it about the same price as the current ones, I'd be actually pretty happy. But if they go up much more than they already are, with the Spartan being, what was it, $112, I think, single pack now? I don't know. I just don't know if it'll be worth it going from the resin to the plastic, at least for me.
I think on paper, the ability to get a Land Raider that's got full, like, wraparound tank treads, as what Blood and Skulls has been selling for a number of years, and getting that in plastic, I think that, again, strictly speaking on paper here, that's very appealing. That's very nice. And for those who like the circular mount sponsons instead of the previous Mark IIB sponsons that we'd had in the Heresy community to kind of make Land Raiders look a little more setting appropriate or era appropriate, again, awesome, super cool. Where Land Raiders sit in the game at present is probably a little more contentious to me than an overall feeling immediately on the value of them all. But I am grateful again for the ability to, if people like the wraparound tread aesthetic, if they want something that's a little more cohesive with Heresy, that they can now get that kind of as a one-click option in plastic.
I have the Proteus with the resin Proteuses for the Sons of Horus. Jack has armored Proteuses for his Ultramarines. I kind of like the aesthetic, but I kind of hope the new box includes the armored side sponsons, because I think that when I do my World Eaters redo, I will want to have the armored sponsons, and if I do a redo of my Iron Warriors again, I will want the armored sponsons there as well. I think I just prefer that aesthetic for those two because they're more of a brutal legion, not quite as techy or upgraded or front of the tip of the spear, as it were.
I mean, it does come with the las cannon, Gravis las cannon option for the front, in addition to the sponsons. I mean, that's a plus.
That's a big plus.
I mean, versus just the default heavy bolters. It's just kind of in the game right now. I don't know. I mean, like, are you going to try and keep them cheap, or are you going to go balls to the wall, like upgrade everything?
I ran 3 las cannons on both of mine, and it was worth the 15 points per Land Raider that I paid for it.
Well, that's kind of the information I'd like to see. I mean, that's one of the reasons I've been holding off building any of my tanks, my big stuff right now, because I mean, I've got a ton to do for my Dark Angels, but it's mainly an armored list. But I've been kind of waiting off to see how it kind of shakes out a little bit with people on their feelings on keeping them cheap or not.
Yeah, in my opinion, you really can't go wrong for spending 15 points on a Strength 9 Twin Link Sunder las cannon to put an extra shot downrange.
Yeah. No, I mean, I agree.
Yeah, the heavy bolters that I had on mine did not really help much.
I'm also looking at the new model right now, and I'm kind of wondering if the doors, they kind of look like they may work with some of the resin ones. Maybe not. I don't know.
Hopefully they will. I'm not gonna lie. With this weekend,
that's interesting that they left the kind of square-looking doors for them. Same way as what they did on the Spartan.
They're not Rhino doors, that's for sure. They kind of actually, they're definitely either Land Raider doors they're Land Raider doors because it's the same door for the Thunderhawk. But and as we said, they're modular so that you can either have the ramp up front or the extra armor with the Dozer Blade, which the Dozer Blade's kind of cool.
I'm a no Dozer Blade kind of guy, so it doesn't do it for me. I usually like the big plow versions that Crosslock had, but no, those aren't really legal for most tanks.
Like the ones that go out in front of the treads? Is that what the ones you're talking about? Okay. I like those too.
All right, so let's go into the big topic of tonight.
That sounds about right, yeah. In honor of the 15th episode, it's time to talk about the 15th Legion, the Thousand Sons. I think, unfortunately, I have ended up with the mantle of resident expert for the 15th, so I'm happy to share that. I've been trying to make sure that I took some time to beef up on them over the last week, and try to make sure that I have as unbiased a position as possible when it comes to the way their lore has gone since kind of that first publication. So first and foremost, the dawning days of the heresy, or I should specify the Great Crusade, where the Primarchs get scattered to all the stars. Magnus ends up on Prospero, and he then ends up in a very similar position, arguably, to what Leman Russ would end up in, where he has a strong, healthy relationship with an appropriately paternal figure who's just like, yeah, kiddo, you can do it. That would later then carry on to petitioning the Emperor, in Russ's case, or some amount of untold sorcery on Magnus's part, in order to make their adoptive fathers into Space Marines, who would be able to join their legion. Although I guess on Russ's end, that's a little bit more his Thanes and his Huskarls joining the legion. But before we get to that point, it's important to draw attention to the fact that my understanding is that Prospero was already, before Magnus ever arrived, a planet steeped in psychic energies and witchcraft. And so it was kind of distrusted by neighboring systems for that reason. What kind of then complicates that is the fact that Psychers were not necessarily safe on Prospero. If you've looked at the war gear for Magistus Ammon, we'll get there too, he has like a Dust of the Destroyer ability, which my interpretation of that is that he carries one of the last clutches of Psychonin eggs. Think of Psychonin as xenomorphs, where their larval stage is kind of a chest burster sort of thing, but it doesn't lay its eggs in just anything. It only lays them in psychers. And so even if you're a nascent psycher, if you're a psycher, if you have that connection and you aren't aware of it, there could totally just be a day where you don't wake up and your family finds that your body is now host to a swarm of psychic insectoid parasites that are particularly horrifying. Not a great place to be, but of course over the time of Magnus's ascension to power, he's able to more or less exterminate these creatures, or at least build cities that are robust enough to be safe from regular attack or random attack from these sorts of creatures. And over the course of his ascension, he's actually, I think anyway, the first Primarch to ever meet the Emperor, but he doesn't do it in person. As he is out and about cruising what he believes to just be the astral sea, he finds kind of a kindred spirit out there, and that's unsurprising because Magnus is kind of born of the psychic manifestation of the Emperor's physiology. So Magnus and the Emperor had communed long before the Emperor was ever able to successfully find Magnus. And the Emperor, up to this point, again, had just told Magnus, like, oh, this is the astral sea, not this is the warp, not you need to be careful for what's out here, just like, cool, you can just be here, and it's a neat place. Understandably, this would kind of set up some unfortunate things down the line. So by the time the Emperor arrives on Prospero, Magnus knows basically what day he's going to show up, what he should be wearing, and greets the Emperor as his father, as an old friend, because he'd known him for so long. And he gets reunited with what remains of his legion. The Thousand Sons, by the time Magnus gets control of them, had been ravaged by something that they just kind of offhandedly referred to as the flesh chain. It's the type of gene seed mutation that we would talk about for the Canis Helix for Space Wolves, or the Red Thirst for Blood Angels. For the unequipped or untrained psyker, there was just a chance that a demon would try to shove its way into your body, into your flesh, and you would mutate and turn into a chaos spawn, and then the rest of your squad mates would have to shoot you and put you down. The Emperor hadn't been able to figure out if or what or how to do anything about this, but Magnus did. As he was out and about the Astral Sea one day, he comes across an entity and makes a deal with the entity. I will give up, I believe it's his right eye, if you can correct the flesh chain. Certainly. It's a done deal. Sign here on the dotted line. This would be the first of many deals that Magnus would make in the warp, to damning effect, because he struck... yeah?
That's an interesting way to say mistake.
Yep. He had made a deal with Tzeentch. He had no idea who Tzeentch was, or what Tzeentch was. He just saw a warp entity who said, hey, I can fix your problem. And keep in mind also at this time, various demons had presented themselves to the Thousand Sons as tutelaries, as these kind of spectral familiars who were happy to give them kind of a guiding hand through the currents of the warp. In and amongst this time, with the flesh change being repealed, and now with Magnus in charge of his legion, Magnus basically founds the Sanctic discipline, or what we would have formerly referred to as the psychic discipline, and I think now would be the equivalent of thaumaturgy, which is all about just keeping the warp at bay. He created a series of, we'll say, like psychic mantra that were designed to help not only him, but his sons calm themselves and find focus, and not just for the purpose of harnessing and controlling their psychic abilities, but also for the purpose of keeping at bay, now slightly occasionally present, predator that would be in the astral sea. So with the flesh change stopped, the Thousand Sons are still undermanned. But they overall reported about the same success as any other legion during the Great Crusade. For whatever they lacked in manpower, they made up for in an ability that could not be quantified by material means, or at least not reasonably. Likewise, there was some sluggishness to their proceedings during the Great Crusade, because once they took a world, they spent a lot of time typically sitting down to catalog everything and collect all the knowledge and all the information that they could have and squirrel it away if they felt that it was not in keeping with imperial truth, or if it was going to lead to problems with dissidents on the planet. And I think we may have referenced this offhandedly on at least one other show, but that type of mentality brought Lehman Russ almost to blows with Magnus on at least one occasion, where Lehman Russ said, well, the world's in compliance, we raise everything we don't need for this world to stay in compliance, and Magnus said, no, I need their knowledge. And there was a big spat, and that was kind of a precursor to what would later happen with Nicaea. So things proceed as they do over the course of the Great Crusade, and finally, the time comes for this question as to the censure of Magnus and the Council of Nicaea. Overall, basically every Primarch gets to weigh in at this trial, but in general, outside of the Khan, who's just like, yeah, I have Psychers, I use Psychers all the time, they're great. And Sanguinius, Sanguinius is just like, hey, since it's just us and Dad and, like, Valdor and one or two other guys in here, I can remind you all, like, I have something in common, not just with Magnus, but with Dad. I'm a Psyker too. I'm prescient. And so Sanguinius, again, big advocate for, really, we can't just suppress this key part of what makes the Thousand Sons Legion functional. But it didn't really matter, because the trial would then involve Mortarion saying, nope, magic is awful and we absolutely can't associate ourselves with it. Would have Lehman Russ say the same thing, would have Valdor say the same thing. And in probably the smallest, most damning betrayal of all, was that there had been a member of the Space Wolves who had kind of buddied up and spent a good number of years and deployments doing kind of the buddy cop movie thing with Ahriman. And it was a psyker by the name of Othmir Wordmate. And Othmir was just like, nope, I am totally not a psyker. Lehman Russ has no psychers. I am a channeler of the power of Fenris. However, what Magnus and Ahriman and the Thousand Sons are doing, that is witchcraft. And that is an abomination. We can't have that. And for someone who had strutted around in the Astral Sea for countless hours with Ahriman, that was a pretty brutal betrayal. From there, Magnus does not comply with the censure, with the edict. He goes back home and he says, well, it's my planet, and it's my rules, and since there's no other Space Marines here, as long as we don't tell the other Space Marines that we are practicing magic, we're just going to keep practicing magic. And in the act of so doing, he stumbles across a vision of Horus falling to chaos. And he goes, oh, well, that's about the worst thing that could happen. Okay. This is after not just the Council of Nicaea, but this is after the Emperor had labeled Horus, War Master, and said, hey, peace out, I'm going to Terra, I got some stuff I gotta work on, don't bother me. So Magnus, of course, knowing that he had no way to get a message to Terra fast enough to try to avert this tragedy, this crisis, decides to project his soul out of his body through the warp and onto Terra. And when he gets to Terra, he finds it encircled in a dome of golden energy. And try as he might, he can't find a way through. He can't wriggle through it, he can't pry it open, he can't get through. But that same warp entity who he had made the deal with to stop the flesh change comes along and says, hey, see, you could need a little extra juice. I have plenty of extra juice. Would you like it? And Magnus goes, oh yeah, yes, I need more power to be able to get through, to get in, because I have a message that absolutely must be shared. Cool, here, have it. So Magnus shatters the golden dome around Terra and strides into his father's throne room to see demons streaming in around this projection of his soul, and between the manifestation of demons and people just losing their mind at the sight of Magnus's incomprehensible soul being physically projected into the throne room, madness and chaos is afoot. Magnus is so distraught at what he sees and making eye contact with the Emperor, who's just kind of vaguely gesturing at the now completely obliterated Golden Throne and the Webway project, that Magnus just kind of hangs his head in shame and walks out. Doesn't tell the Emperor a thing.
This is also, well, he says father, and this is actually the first time the Emperor actually says a word. Every other time the Emperor has spoken, it's always been someone else kind of translating it or talking about it. Like Arkham Land always talks about how the Emperor spoke, but this is the first time the Emperor actually, we get to read the words the Emperor spoke. And so it's kind of interesting to see him actually possibly speak for the first time.
Yeah. I apparently missed that part in my notes and in my readings. And he kind of asks Magnus, like, what have you done? You've broken it, destroyed. Again, Magnus kind of, like, hangs his head in shame and just darts back through the warp to get home. He gets back, and his captains, so at this time, you had Ahriman, who was his first captain, and also the chief librarian, as well as the head of the Corvidae Temple. So, when I spoke earlier and I said, oh, yeah, Magnus kind of founded the school of thaumaturgy, of sanctidemonology. He founded different colleges, and as, kind of Harry Potter wizard college fashion, sorted all the Thousand Sons into, okay, you're gonna go to this school and that school and the other school. And each of those schools had a Space Marine at the top of them who was head of that school. So you've got 6 of them in total, of which is Ahriman, and Magnus comes back, soul enters his body, and he is inconsolable. And he won't tell anybody what's happened, and he's just kind of skulking around Tizca, around Prospero, up until one day when they're like, hey, our fleet is gone. And he's like, yep, it sure is. Was that a problem? I mean, it would be if I hadn't sent them away. Why would you send the fleet away? They don't want to be here for what's about to happen. What do you mean, what's about to happen? And it's about that time that the Space Wolves start shelling Prospero. This is where history gets muddy. So we do know at some level that Russ never liked Magnus. Russ cared nothing for magic because it was not the sharpest steel or the strongest teeth, and therefore why would he have need of it? We know that Horus had already begun succumbing to the machinations of chaos, and we know that the edict came down from the Emperor through Malkador to send not just Lehman Russ, but also Janisha Kroll and Constantine Valdor to go collect Magnus. The official word of the Emperor through Malkador to Horus was, bring me Magnus. And what Horus tells Russ is, be a good boy and do what you were bred to do, and bring me Magnus' head. So Russ shows up, sees the planet entirely defenseless, assumes it must be a trick or a trap of some sort, and starts shelling it. This is where things get exponentially bad. So Magnus's captains start to turn on as Tizca gets shelled, to the point where Magnus, I forget if he burns one to a crisp or just like turns him inside out or like collapses him into a singularity. He's just like, no, you're not allowed to leave. This has to happen. And finally, one of them screams at him loud enough to tell him, like, I know that you think this is your punishment, but all of us are about to pay for it, even if we never fire a shot in anger, and we will not go quietly into the night. The battle rages on, things happen, and finally, Russ is on the battlefield. And Magnus sees Russ on the battlefield, and in an attempt to try to get things to be over as quickly as they can be over, tracks down Armin, hands him his entire collected knowledge, his spellbook, the Tome of Magnus. And he says, hold this, I probably won't be back for this. Gets into a fight with Russ, and this is, narratively, the first instance we have, not just of Russ going after another Primarch, but any two Primarchs really throwing down with the intent to kill one. And the whole time, Magnus is telling him, man, if you call your forces off, I can just go. And Russ went, nope, I've got to kill all of you. Again, complicated. Why do you send Faldor and Janicia Kroll if you're not intending to have an extermination for the Thousand Sons?
And weren't there also some Thousand Sons that also went too?
Well, so that's where I said the fleet had been dismissed. So Magnus basically mind-wiped the entire fleet, and he gave them a set of psychic instructions that wouldn't be unsealed for like 10,000 years. Spoiler, this is how I got into Thousand Sons, that army ends up being the Blood Ravens. They wake up one day in the middle of deep space with no memory, and their entire heraldry has been painted up and done as Blood Ravens, and they're just told, oh, hey, by the way, the Emperor needs you. Go fight like Space Marines.
And they have a serious penchant for thievery.
That is apocryphal. That is non-canonical.
They're thieves. They do things like stealing Bjorn the Fellhanded.
Yes, again, utterly apocryphal. You can't prove it. But there are some pretty funny stories about it.
Never passed like they've never care of. I thought that was a really interesting part. I was reading the war gear on, I think it was the second game, where like every piece of war gear had a fluff bit, and one of them was like a High Lord reflecting on how odd it was that they'd never been allowed past Luna or even stepping foot onto Terra.
Yep.
Yes.
And
some of that war gear was things like, this is the bolt pistol we received from the Space Wolves. The Space Wolves have no knowledge that we received this. Sounds like thievery to me, sir.
We might be just... Go ahead.
5-finger discount.
Yeah.
Acquired it, I believe is the military term.
Acquired.
I mean, the Space Wolf wasn't using it anymore, mostly on the fact that he didn't kneecaps anymore, but, you know, things happen. You see a couple orcs, somebody loses their kneecaps, they're orcs, it happens. It's fine.
Yes, I agree, it's fine.
But circling back, Zinch comes to Magnus in this fight, and he's like, hey man, your brother's kinda whooping your ass. You know, I can do something about this. And the whole fight, Magnus is just like, no, he's not gonna do this. He can see reason. And Russ finally catches Magnus across the face, breaks his concentration, breaks his back over his knee, in the very classic, like, Bane fighting Batman moment from the comics. And before the headsman's axe could fall, Magnus finally goes, okay, you win, Zinch. He won't see reason. And pulls the entire, well, not the entire, pulls most of the planet into the warp, where it is now known as the Planet of Sorcerers, and, in so doing, with his body shattered, also shatters his soul. The soul shattering is not present in the novel A Thousand Suns, but has been retconned into the lore as of the progression of the heresy novels, and especially in the Siege of Terra.
It was also in the Fury of Magnus book, if I'm correct.
Yes, yeah, that's where I said your later heresy stuff and your Siege of Terra stuff, because they wanted to put the Thousand Sons back in the narrative. They did this.
Yeah, I found that book really confusing.
Major spoilers ahead. I'll try to figure out how to mark this in such a way that if you don't want to know what happens during the Siege of Terra with Magnus's soul, you can skip it. As it turns out, the thing to do is for me to cut in right here. This is being recorded after the fact, and I'm just making sure to drop it in. You're going to want to fast forward about 7 minutes if you want to preserve either any spoilers for novels that you haven't completed, or if you, much as I would identify myself, prefer the lore of the Thousand Sons before everything that has followed that specific novel by Graham McNeill. If you don't want to know it, fast forward 7 minutes. You can get to all the army building and a little bit of unit discussion and review, and I'm happy to talk about all that, but this is kind of your last warning. Again, fast forward 7 minutes, and we'll see you on the other side. Magnus gets to Terra, strikes a deal with Perturabo so that he can do a little bit of a secret mission to try to get into the Imperial Palace, because he, at this point of the heresy, has recollected all of his soul shards except one, and he believes that remaining soul shard is all the goodness that is left in him, and that's why he has done bad things up to this point. Things transpire, and Magnus secretly, quietly, cloaks himself and Ahriman and a couple other dudes, and they infiltrate the palace. In the act of infiltrating the palace, either part of the palace, like one of the turrets or something, gets blown apart, or something comes through to shell part of the civilian population, and Magnus throws a barrier over them and saves them. And Ahriman asks, like, why would you do that? Why would you risk blowing our cover to save them? And Magnus just goes, I suppose I don't know, which is interesting, because if all of his goodness is out of him, they get into the basement below Terra, where they find where the Primarchs were supposed to be raised before they got scattered to. There they find the Primarch's mother / wife of the Emperor, and Malkador. And Magnus, to our knowledge, has never seen Mom, and has not seen Malkador since the censure. And he confronts Malkador, and he's like, why would you do what you did? And Malkador's like, I wish I could tell you. Because Malkador was the one who gave the Custodians and the Sisters of Silence to go with Russ. And Magnus is just like screaming, demanding an answer. And he's like, let's not act like you're innocent here either, Magnus. What did you do? You disobeyed a direct order, which was the censure and the Council of Nicaea, and you've now blown up the Golden and you've come all the way here. So what is it, Magnus? Do our actions have consequences, or don't they? And in that moment, Magnus experiences rage and kills Malkador. Burns him to a crisp. And a stray round catches Mom. So he kills the legionary who shot Mom and goes on his way. Gotta keep pressing forward for the Malkador has like warned him, like, hey, by the way, your soul shard isn't here, because I used it to found the Grey Knights, and the goodness is in you. You just need to like figure out what you're gonna do about it. They continue on. As a like off-screen note, Mom is a perpetual too, and she sacrifices herself to bring Malkador back to life, because Malkador still has to go and park himself on the Golden Throne long enough for the Emperor to go die to Horus. Spoiler. Magnus gets to the throne room, and the throne room is empty of everyone who's not the Emperor, who is on the Golden, and Vulcan. And the Emperor finally relaxes his focus on the Golden Throne long enough to have a brief conversation with Magnus, and tells him, like, okay, we can fix a lot of this. You'd have to sit on the chair until I can sort this whole heresy thing out, and I can give you the Grey Knights, but the Thousand Sons have got to go. The flesh change is too rampant. You can't fix it. I can't fix it. But it's fixed for the Grey Knights. I will give you the Grey Knights. We're just going to have to, like, leave the Thousand Sons to their fate. You're going to have to sit here on the Golden Throne while I mop up all this heresy business. And that's what it's going to take. And Magnus just went, so I came all this way for you to tell me that the only way to save myself is to sell you my sons. Understandably, this is a price too high for Magnus to pay. And he gets into it with Vulcan, and Vulcan kills him. So that's what causes Magnus to ascend to a Demon Primarch in time for 40k. Hooray! I picked the right legions. My Primarchs have all died. They've never won combat. But it's a long string of tragedy the whole way through, because then, seeing that with Magnus, inspires Ahriman to attempt the rubric as a way to try to cure the Thousand Sons. And Magnus basically yells at him the same way the Emperor did, which is, you've cursed my sons with suffering for the fact that you tried to cure them from their suffering. Get out of my sight. And Magnus banishes Ahriman to go wander, and that sends Ahriman on a quest for the Black Library, and then later crazier things as the lore has kind of spiraled the way it has in 40k. So there's your various tragedies there of brothers equipped with purpose and then denied that purpose.
I will say I'm not quite certain how far up on 40k lore, but the most recent of the Thousand Sons novels, or the Ahriman books, somehow Ahriman reversed the rubric on one Marine.
He did on one Marine, but that's a little less impactful than the fact that he bumps into some of the Ynnari, the Eldar servants of the Death God, and he's like, hey, I need to figure out your magic so that I can save my brothers. And the Ynnari respond by, oh, you mean like this? And one of them, like, snaps their fingers, and the three rubrics who are there with Ahriman just get entirely unrubriced.
Yeah.
And he's like, yeah, I need to learn how to do that. And she just went, absolutely not, and just snaps her fingers again and just disintegrates them. So yeah, he's not too happy with the Ynnari right now.
No, obviously not. But it does show that even without the Eldar magic, or the Eldar psychery, or whatever you want to call it, that somehow the rubric can be reversed through the actual machinations of Ahriman and the other sorcerers. Somehow.
Possibly.
So
Someone
it does
has
put a little bit of a redemption arc towards the end of that whole
yes.
tragedy, screw up, possible redemption, maybe in the future.
I honestly think that it's just going to continue to be Greek tragedy all the way down, because what continues to fuel the tragedy is the promise of, no, really, just do like 5,000 more horrible things, and then something good will happen.
Yes, like all his self-depreciating humor.
Ba-dum-bum. So I'll put something in to bring listeners back here if they don't want the spoilers. This takes us to Thousand Sons on the Tabletop. They are a far cry from what they were in Book 7. I really like how they're on track to play this edition, but that doesn't mean they are without problems. So first and foremost, just as it was the case last edition, and just as I talked about the various psychic temples for the Thousand Sons, you've still got that as their Legions Astartes special. It's called Cult Arcana. Every unit that you field in your army has to be assigned to a cult, and they all get to be considered psychers. Neat. In addition, your characters can choose to buy True Psychic Disciplines at 15 points. Neat. So, you do still have that ability to play pseudo-librarian HQ choices without having to say, like, oh, I want a librarian, but. So you can now take the Psychic Discipline. I don't know that you necessarily get Force Weapons, but that's in the War Gear section. We'll get there. And kind of double dip on that, which is cool. You've got that advanced reaction that they can get a Storm Shield for one shooting attack. Pretty cool. and if you fail to cast the power successfully, it causes perils for both you and the shooting. Before I go any further here, it's important to give a little bit of background and context on how psychics work. Psychics, you take a leadership test. If you pass, great, you get the thing. If you don't pass, you suffer perils, which is a D3 wounds, against which only, I think it's only adamantine will be wrong there, but that's my recollection. You've got, let's run the cults before we get into warlord traits. So you do have, similar as what there used to be. Now, these don't lock you to a psychic discipline when you take them on, which is very nice. They finally, your big hang up here is that with infantry moving to lead 7 base, lead 8 on characters, it becomes a lot harder to cast a lot of these, or at least to cast them reliably. And that only gets more complicated if the enemy brought a librarian or an esoterist with a psychic hood, because that'll be a -2 penalty to your leadership. Means instead of casting on 8s, you're casting on 6s, and given that any time you fail, you just take a D3 wounds, that's not. We've got Reptora, which now, at the end of your movement, if you are within 12 inches of at least one enemy model, at least one enemy model, you get +1 to your invulnerable save to a maximum of 4+. I'm glad that this is not the go-to that it used to be last time, but I think they probably overcorrected this, because now I have to be both within 12 inches, and it caps my invuln at a 4-up. Capping on a 4-up, I think, is totally fair, is totally fine. If you don't want anybody other than Imperial Fists and Salamanders to have Storm Shields, that's fine. But limiting this to, you have to take a Psychic test, and it still only puts you to a maximum of a 4+, does kind of blunt some of its use. Pyre, when you declare a charge, you can take a Psychic check. If you pass, every model gains Hammer of Wrath 2, and those count as flame attacks. Pavoni. This is one that I think, if people are sleeping on it, I really would hope that they don't, because I think this might be, short of Corvidae, the most powerful rule out of these 5. Pavoni says, when you start a move or a run during your movement phase, you can take the Psychic test. If you pass, you get +3 inches to the distance moved, and may ignore any penalties to their movement for moving through difficult terrain. So, in this edition where difficult terrain slows you down by a flat 2 inches, you took a squad that was supposed to move 7, or move 5 through cover, and it's now moving 10 inches. Really, really powerful for trying to push your assault units into combats that they shouldn't be able to hit, for trying to get your scoring choices to kind of scoot onto objectives at the last possible minute. Extremely potent ability. Do not sleep this. Then there is Corvidae. When you go to make a shooting attack, if you pass, you choose what model wound allocation starts on. That's real gross. So if the other guy's got a Tech Marine or an Apothecary that you're really needing to dig out of the unit, you can choose to start wound allocation on that model, where it will continue to harry that model until they... do you want to have Sniper Las Cannons? You can now have Sniper Las. And then last but not least, there is Athenaean, which has the same trigger as Corvidae. When you go to make a shooting attack, you cast the power. If you pass... if the enemy has to take any leadership check as a result of your shooting, they do so at -1. So if you had some of those old rotor cannons built when you used to be allowed to take shredder rounds on those, back in Book 7, Athenaean's going to be a great go-to there. Same for your recon squads, for your, the Amatara, well, no, I don't think the Amatara Scout Cabal get this ability, but still, conditionally very worth taking. Under Warlord traits, you've got Evoker of Pain, which is traitor only, and whenever the Warlord, fails a psychic check and causes perils, the Warlord, nor his unit, will actually suffer those wounds. Instead, you pick an enemy unit, if one is available, within 6 inches, and then they suffer the D3 wounds. It's only invulnerable saves. So, apparently I think you can take invulns against perils. But you get to just dump wounds on the other guy. So if people in your group start taking more psychic hoods, and you want to tell them to stop that, Evoker of Pain is a great way to do that. You've also got Magister of Prospero, which I think this is probably going to be a more reliable default selection for a lot of people, because Magister of Prospero says when your warlord or a unit they've joined makes a psychic check, you roll an additional die and drop the highest. Makes it very, very difficult to fail your casts or therefore to suffer perils. Very nice, especially if you're going to be putting your warlord with Sekhmet and or another character so that you can have multiple models capitalizing on this power.
Going back to that Evoker of Pain one, what happens if not within the range? Does it just...
If there's no valid enemy within 6, resolve the perils against the warlord as usual.
Okay.
Yep. And it does specify if for whatever reason you caused some wounds during the assault phase with this warlord trait, they do not count towards combat resolution.
Oh.
Yep. And then the last one is Eidolon of Suffering. A warlord with this trait may not use psychic powers and gains Adamantine Will 3-up. Adamantine Will, again, special save that you get to take against perils. The advantage to why you could have that Adamantine Will on this model, even though it's your warlord, is because when another model suffers perils, they can pawn those on to any other models in the unit. So if you have another Psyker, again, whether that's like your Sekhmet Sergeant or just anybody, you can just dump perils onto this guy and hope that he rocks it on a 3-up. When another model, friendly or enemy, makes a psychic check within 12 inches of the warlord, the controlling player must roll a d6. On a 1, there's no effect. On a 2+, the warlord gains Rage 2 for the remainder of the battle. If this trait would grant the warlord Rage 2 a further time, it instead increments the Rage by +1 up to a maximum of Rage 4. So, for your warlord not being able to cast psychic powers, you can just dump Perils of the Warp wounds on him, and then you can give him Rage between 2 and 4, just for the purposes of like sending him diving in, whether it's with a Thunderhammer or Paragon Blade, and just trying to make a mess out of the enemy, the old-fashioned way. The Thousand Sons also have a number of unique war gear that have a special rule called Achaean Force. Achaean Force is the only psychic test that if you fail it, you don't suffer perils, but instead of it being true force and doubling the strength of the attack, it only gives +2 strength. There's still some interesting things you can do there in terms of putting axes on the Sekhmet and then casting Biomancy on the Sekhmet, because the axe natively still gives +1 strength, so you can Achaean Force for +2 strength, and then you can Biomancy to kick them to Strength 8 with their axes, which is a cute thing that you can do if you're willing to take 2 psychic tests to allow them to instant death without having to be power fists. There is Magnus the Red, who, in my opinion, they've done Magnus pretty dirty this edition. That's kind of conditional, but he's not really able to take on a Dreadnought, and he's kind of alone in Primarch Fight Club as far as Primarchs who cannot take on a Dreadnought, which is really comfortable. So, Movement 8, Weapon 7, Ballistics 6, Strength Tough 6, 6 wounds, I6, 6 attacks, lead 10, 2-up save. His Sire of the Thousand Sons ability gives the entire army both +1 to their Adamantine Will, so if you had it natively, it gets 1 point better, or if you didn't have it, you get a 6-up, and it makes your Perils of the Warps, instead of D3 wounds, D3 -1 to a minimum. Kind of a letdown, but not the worst. He does know all the psychic powers. He gets to automatically pass a psychic test to activate any one Thousand Sons cult power per turn, and then he still gets to use the big rulebook powers however he sees fit in a turn. When selecting targets for his psychic powers, all models within range are assumed to be in line of sight. He's got 2-up armor, 4-up invulnerable, and takes 1 fewer wound from destroyer weapons than he normally would. He does have a native 5-up Shrouded, as well as Adamantine Will 3-up, and he does have native Deep Strike, for whatever that's worth. His melee weapon, Strength 6, AP 1, Melee, Force, and 2-handed. Seeing that at Strength 6 causes problems. With how the game is worded currently, fixed values overwrite all math. So even though it says he's Strength 6, technically that keeps Force from working successfully, because he has a fixed value, and that would override the fact that Force is supposed to double his strength. It also means that if he, for whatever reason, chose Biomancy, and chose to cast Iron Arm, he will not successfully make himself Strength 7, and then have the ability to force himself to Strength 14 to gain instant death against Dreadnoughts. Unfortunate. And then his shooting attack is a Sci-Fire Serpentia, which is a Plasma Volkite Serpentia. 15-inch, Strength 3, AP 2, Assault 3, Deflagrate, and Force. So if you take your Psychic test to force this, and your opponent lets it happen, congratulations, you get a Strength 6, AP 2 with Deflagrate and Assault 3. Awesome. Keep in mind, Primarchs also always assign where their wounds go. So this gun technically has a lot of potential as far as the ability to snipe off the Apothecary and the Sergeant and the Tech Marine very quickly for units, or start sniping out Power Fists. But with the number of multi-wound infantry that we're seeing, that might be challenging to deliver on reliably. Still cool to see Deflagrate, though. There's also, we'll finish the special characters before we get to Legion-specific units. The Legion has both Ahriman and Magistus Ammon available to them. Ahriman is pretty cheap, all told. He's under 200 points. Move 7, he's only Weapons 5, which is kind of disappointing. Ballistics 5, Strength Tough 4, 3 wounds, I5, 4 attack space, lead 10, 2-up armor, 4-up invulnerable, 3-up adamantine will. Wonderful. He will let you redeploy, 3 units? Yeah, you get to redeploy 3 friendly units at the start of the game, as part of his Warlord trait, which is what that is. I'm glad that they made it so that it's not quite as restrictive as it was last time. So it used to be you gave Scout, but only to 3 infantry troop options. So they at least did away with that. And as far as bonus reaction, Ahriman does get to pick any single phase to get a bonus reaction in. You don't have to declare it ahead of time, you don't have to warn your opponent, hey, I'll be taking 2 shooting reactions, and you don't have to spend that bonus reaction on Ahriman's unit. That's pretty cool. The real reason why you take Ahriman is because he might just be the biggest rockstar in close combat. So even though he's only weapon skill 5, he is, his melee weapon is the Corvidaean Scepter. Strength +1, AP 2, melee, Reach 1, Force, and Master Crafted. So he gets to claim dual armed with this. He gets to swing at I6, and if he forces, he goes to Strength 9. He's Master Crafted, so 5 attacks, even if he's somehow only hitting on 3s because he ended up in a challenge with an enemy Praetor, you're still getting to swing at I6, so before the enemy Praetor even has a chance to get his Paragon Blade out, and you have a very real chance to instant death him, because by the time you make 5 attacks, even if you only hit 2 on the front half, you've got a chance to get a 3rd, you'll wound on 2s, and then as soon as they fail, 1 save. Ahriman also has the fortune of being able to know both the Divination and Thaumaturgy disciplines. Pretty cool. Magistus Ammon is then the same points as Ahriman. He, for whatever reason, gets weapon skill 6, even though he's just a human with a lot of magic surrounding him, but hey, who's counting? He's also in 2-up, 4-up, and he does some weird stuff. So he does have an Archaeotech pistol, which is pretty cool. Those got a bit of a bump with the new edition. Likewise, his warlord trait says all units in the same army with infiltrate and scout gain shrouded 5+ during the first 2 game turns. So if you wanted to play Recon Company Thousand Sons, this is your guy. And he gets an additional movement reaction. He himself gets shrouded 4+ as long as he is within area terrain. His melee weapon is Strength User, AP 2, Melee, Poison 4+, Reaping Blow 1, and Mastercraft. So he cannot truly use that as a force weapon. But it's still pretty potent in close combat. It's AP 2 to 5. And then finally, he's got a shooting attack, which is a 6-inch range, Strength 1, AP Dash, Assault 2d6, Poison 4+, Concussive 3 with Rending 6+. So Concussive 3 is a great chance to try to get you a weapon skill boost against an army that you really don't have any business confronting in close combat. And then he gets access to divination and telepathy. Pretty cool, especially if you've seen telepathy in action. You know that anytime he's not within that 6-inch range to use the Reliquary of Dust, he's going to be able to use the pinning shot that comes from the telepathy discipline. Pretty potent. As for special units, we've got Sekhmet. Sekhmet are way more balanced in the greater context of the game than they were last edition. 275 points for 5 models. They did get the bump to Weapon Skill 5 this edition. Very exciting. They kept 2 wounds, 2 attacks base, 3 on their character, lead 8 base, lead 9 on the character, and they're in Cataphractii armor. No other special rules outside of for 25 points, you can buy their character access to a psychic discipline from the big rule. It's kind of a hefty price to pay, but given how potent some of the rules and abilities are in there, you can accomplish some pretty impressive feats, including the aforementioned casting Iron Arm on the whole squad, which will bring them to tough 5. For anybody who's tried to deal with Terminators in close combat normally, I imagine that moving them to tough 5 and therefore disallowing instant death from conventional weapons, that only makes things more challenging. You've also got the Kenetai Blade Occult, which are the dudes with the 2 power swords. Weapon skill 5, they are 2 wounds, but they're only in power armor, and they don't have an invulnerable save. Not a huge fan of these guys. I think they're really expensive for what you get, but I do appreciate that thankfully putting rending on power swords helps them a bunch. Likewise, they get a unique psychic power, instead of being able to pick one of the other cult arcana. So no giving these guys both their Cult Arcana and the Mind Song of Blades like you could last edition. Mind Song of Blades says, at the start of your turn, you can take a psychic test for this unit. If the check is passed, it gains +1 to movement, weapon skill, and attacks. Getting +1 to movement is pretty good as far as once you move 8 inches or you have a move characteristic of 8. It does give you +1 to your charge range. +1 weapon skill will push them to weapon 6, which could help them win some combats that they otherwise wouldn't. And then +1 attack will put them from 2 attacks base, 3 for dual armed, 4 for the power, 5 for the charge. You're looking at 50 attacks for a whole squad of 10 of these guys. Understandably, real strong, but being in 3-up armor with no Inmoln save, to me, kinda limits the application of these. Finally, we get into, short of their Legacies units, we get into their mechanical choices. So the Thousand Sons did have a dedicated Forge World, and that allowed them the privilege to get some things like the Osiran Dreadnought. The Osiran Dreadnought is a pretty sizable upcharge over a standard Dreadnought, and it doesn't really get anything for that privilege. Move 8, Weapons Ballistics 5, Strength Tough 7, 6 wounds, I4, 3 attacks. Same 2-up armor, same 5-up Inmol, it's got the Automantic Deflector, the same as every other Dreadnought. It's got a 4-up Adamantine Will, which I guess is cool enough. And the other notable thing about it, short of the ability to take, like, the Aetherfire Magna Cannon, which is a Strength 6 large blast weapon that you could Achaean Force to Strength 8, but I think it's only AP 4 and Rending 6+. So, could be fun there, if you find that people are liking to play vet squads and stuff. That'd give you the capacity to instant death some of those units that are only in 3-up armor. And then the melee weapon is Strength 9, AP 2, Melee, Brutal 2 with Achaean Force. While it's not particularly exciting to pay more points up front to lose a point of Brutal, just to gain an Achaean Force ability, there is some give and take there where you don't have to dual arm them with a Chain Fist and a Brutal Close Combat weapon if you want to have a hope of both taking on a Spartan and its contents. So, trying to stay glass half full there. You do also get the ability to buy a Minor Arcana for 15 points if you choose. So that would let him take either the 1 for +1 invulnerable save, which would let him move to a 4-up invuln if he got within 12 inches of enemies, or you could take the one that lets him choose where wounds start getting allocated first. So if you took either like a Gravis Las Cannon or the Gravis Melta Cannon, you now get the ability to really kind of hammer away at character. As well as the ability to, for 50 points, buy him a True Psychic Discipline. So if you buy everything on him, you get to within like 40 or 50 points of a fully dressed Leviathan. And depending on your loadout, it can be as little as like 20 points to a fully dressed Leviathan. And you can get a Dreadnought where if you take a Psychic test and don't shoot any guns, you can be tough 8 just like the Leviathan can. Kind of unfortunate that they end up so many points to be able to do some okay tricks. But I think it's a fun model, and I'm glad that it doesn't... I should say, I am glad that it is not as bad as what it was last edition, where you paid a whole bunch of points for something that only kind of functioned in rules. And then last and maybe most interesting are the Castellax Achaea. So the Achaea are Weapons 3, Ballistics 4, Strength Tough 6, 4 wounds, I3, 2 attacks, Lead 8, 3-up save with an Automantic Deflector. They do have Adamantine Will, 4-up, which is important because I think in their rules they can absorb Perils of the Unit, Perils of the Warp for other nearby units. Likewise, they do have a pretty interesting Rite of War that we talked about on our budget list build episode, where you can move these guys to non-compulsory line choices and give them the ability to score, non-compulsory troops, which conditionally gain line if another Psyker is within, I think it's like 6 inches. So you can take like a Master of the Forge, since they have Master of Automata rule now, and you can attach one of these guys. And then you have a pretty cool bodyguard unit with some pretty respectable shooting, walking around, and they'll score. Their close combat weapons are Strength 6, AP 3, Rending 5-up, and they do have Achaean Force, so you can kick them to Strength 8 if you need to. Their shooting weapons, I don't think are quite as inspiring as they were last edition, but they do natively come with the Asphyx Bolt Cannon, which is a 24-inch, Strength 6, AP 4, Heavy 4 with Shred, or I think for 0 points, they can swap that for a 24-inch, Strength 6, AP 4, Rending 6-up Small Blast with Achaean Force. So that would be another gun that you could kick up to Strength 8 if you needed to try to instant death infantry or hunt some light armor if the case arose. I just would tell people to be leery about trying to hunt tanks with it, because Strength 8 with no AP, at best you're just hoping to keep the tank from shooting you for a turn. And then the Scout Cabal, I don't have their rules in front of me immediately, but I know they kept those guys in only a 4-up armor save, which is really weird since Recon Marines got to keep their 3-up. Understandably, I'm not super keen on them, but if you're taking Magistus Ammon, there's worse things you can take in. Their other Rite of War, above and beyond the one that turns the Castellax into non-compulsory troop choices, is Guard of the Crimson King, and I think it lets you take Terminators as non-compulsory troop choices, but they don't gain line. Overall, that Rite of War really got toned down from what it was last edition, with like the re-rolling invulnerable saves and some of the other nastiness that was present. As far as what to expect out of this army, as stated in kind of our teaser last time, and stated as we talked about the various cults here, you have a lot of player agency with this army. The fact that each unit that you write into your list, you get to make a choice of what special ability that unit has on the tabletop, is extremely potent. Even though you're not going to get that ability all game long, and you may only get to resolve it like once or twice per game, and you might have to deal with some rough perils here and there, that's some of the price you pay for this player agency. No other legion can just arbitrarily decide that they want to move 3 inches faster than what they would normally be allowed to move and just ignore terrain in the process. No other legion can take their Tartaros Terminators and just give them a 4-up invulnerable save. No other legion can just snap their fingers and choose for their heavy support squad to be able to snipe a character and then mop the rest of the unit after it. So there's a lot of potency there, and there's a lot of agency there, and I think more Thousand Sons games are going to be won or lost based on what cults you chose and when and how you chose to use them than what you're going to have with other legions. But I personally find that extremely rewarding to be able to have that in my hands, rather than just, well, once the army's on the table, there's nothing left to do but start it up and see how it goes. Do you guys have any questions about the army?
I have one, and it's something that's bothered me since last edition. What is the actual reasoning behind why the Thousand Sons have automata?
So that's because they had their own Forge World, similar to like Raven Guard had a super tight relationship with their Forge World. And they didn't use a conventional power plant. They, so in a cruel twist of fate, their automata kind of foreshadow how the rubric come to be. Because the automata, most of the time, they just sit there until a Psyker kind of reaches out and, like, mentally flips the on switch and then starts driving them around. They're excellent bodyguards in the lore, and they come on a lot of, or on 1 or 2, I think anyway, like, recovery missions. And it's to the point where the technology that was to assemble them actually got put into a Titan of some sort. I had always assumed it to be a Warhound, but I don't know if it's ever concretely nailed down in the novel. But the chief librarian for the Pyre cult killed this Titan's crew at some point, and he kept their Titan as his prize. And so at the battle for Tizca, he just wires his soul into the Warhound and just goes on an absolute rampage until either his body burns out or until they fell the Warhound. And I think both kind of happen at about the same time, because he sees the Titan falling apart underneath him and he just wills it along harder, which starts consuming his physical form.
That was a Warhound, you said?
I think it was a Warhound, but I don't know if that's just my projection.
I thought it was a larger class Titan.
I thought it was too.
Warlord or like a warmonger, because it was kind of like a statue over the city.
Yes,
almost.
It was very much described as that. So it wasn't necessarily over the whole city. He just had it sitting in front of his temple all the time. He was just like, yeah, that Colossus at Rhodes, yeah, that's mine. I won that. I beat somebody up and I took their lunch money and that was it. And that's because they took the same psychically attuned crystals that they presumably like made their Archaean Force weapons out of, and they wired it up with that.
Okay, so that actually does make sense and actually give me a better understanding where they come from. So thank you for that.
Yeah,
That's one
my
thing
pleasure.
that always bothered me.
It's also interesting that in 1,000 Suns, the 1,000 Suns themselves are in the process of starting to test the Elastus assault cannon. But they continued to call it the Reaper because they said, well, Reaper has 6 letters and the weapon has 6 barrels, and there's no more perfect word for what this does than Reaper.
Makes sense. Anybody else?
Negative, Ghost Rider.
Well, gentlemen, thank you for indulging me as we got to go on this little side tangent this episode. I appreciate the opportunity, and otherwise, do we have any other notes to close out on?
Sorry about the XXL show tonight, but you have plenty of listing material.
Yeah, I think that this clocking in as of recording at 2 hours and 45 minutes is possibly our longest show ever put to tape. We'll see how it comes out after editing, but certainly been a long one. Jack and Duncan, I appreciate you two coming on, as well as Joe, who has unfortunately left us, to regale us with your excellent tales of Music City Heresy. Really hope I get the chance to go next time, and similarly, that means I'm looking forward to, hopefully we can convince Nick to come on for a show and tell us all about how Michigan GT goes when we get there.
That'd be nice.
Yeah. Otherwise, without further ado, I've been Jacob, and this show I've been joined by
Duncan.
Jack.
John.
And Jamie.
as well as those who are no longer present with us, being Joe and Dan. We're glad you joined us. Remember, stay accountable to your hobby and to your buddies, and we'll see you next time.